Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, A Practical Approach to Demystifying Digital Transformation. I'm Miles Skoda, the web editor for Field Technologies Online, and thanks again for joining us. So, with the phrase digital transformation, it's become a buzzword in the service world over the last few years. Yet it's a concept that has many definitions depending on whom you ask. There's no really right answer, but the right answer is, what will work for your organization. If you're not one of the 53% of service leaders that have a clear transformation strategy in place, you're in the right place because we brought in some experts to help you out. With that in mind, on today's webinar, you're going to hear from service industry veterans from the Service Council, Chris Guerra, the Executive VP and General Manager, and Greg Gibbs, the VP of Global Customer Transformation, in addition to Emily Hackman from Astea International, who are going to give you some great insight and help you follow the whole digital transformation path. We'll be holding a Q&A session following this presentation where everybody will be answering questions. Feel free to submit questions as we go along. We'll get to as many as possible during the Q&A, and any that we can't get to, we'll follow up on after the event. If you experience any issues during the presentation, please try refreshing your browser first. If not, submit a question through the Q&A, and we'll help get you back on track. With all that said, I'm going to turn it over to Emily real quick to get us started. Emily?
Great. Thank you so much, Miles. My name is Emily Hackman. I'm the Director of Global Marketing here at Astea International. We really appreciate everyone taking a few minutes of your time. I know it's a busy time of year, so thanks for spending some time with us today. As you see on your screen with the agenda, here are some of the things and topics that Greg and Chris will be talking with you about today. And just for some background, why did Astea want to talk about this digital transformation topic? Well, one of the reasons that we wanted to bring the Service Council on board to help with this is they have a lot of great insight. They have a global member base of service leaders who continually provide feedback, and having that kind of direct connection with true service-minded organizations is really important to us here at Astea, and it's really something we like to foster with our clients. As far as the research, where are they going to get this data and these statistics that they'll be sharing with you today? The Service Council produced two research reports this year on the topic of digital transformation. Astea sponsored these reports, and so if this is a topic of interest to you, feel free to reach out to me personally. I'm really happy to share those with you after today's event. The definition, they'll be talking about how to define digital transformation for your organization, because the reality is it's going to mean something different for every company, and everyone is at a different stage. Towards the end of the presentation, Greg and Chris will provide a roadmap that can help you figure out where you're at in your transformation and what your next steps should be. In the consultant view, they're going to share with you kind of what Miles already touched on, which is digital transformation is a buzzword. There's a lot of hype and jargon in the market about it, but the reality is there are real challenges that companies are facing around things like talent acquisition and management, improving the customer experience, and continually being compared to digitally native companies that are even outside the scope of field service. One of the reasons we wanted to talk about this topic today, if any of you were at the Field Service Amelia Island event, Astea actually sponsored a roundtable on this exact topic, and we heard things like companies are trying to form the actual building blocks of digital transformation. They're dealing with real issues like how do you clean the data before you share it with your clients, because clients want more transparency. And so these are some of the actual real challenges that Greg and Chris are going to be talking with you today and sharing some actionable advice on what you can do to kind of get beyond the hype and beyond the buzzword and actually impact some real change. If you're not familiar with Astea, we've been around for nearly 40 years. We're the global market leaders in field service management. I'm not going to read everything on the screen to you. By now, I think most people actually know who we are. But one thing that we're going to be announcing next week is that we have been named the 2018 Company of the Year for Mobile Field Service Management. We're really proud of that. So I hope you have a chance to check us out if you haven't already. But with that, I'd love to turn it over to Chris, who's going to start walking you through today's presentation.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, wherever that finds you. This is Chris Guerra with the Service Council. And just briefly, I'll give you just a little bit of background on the Service Council and who we are and what we do. We've been around for about 10 years. And we are a community-based organization focused on service and really trying to elevate the dialogue of service globally and trying to help folks like yourselves and service leaders across the globe do better for their organizations and do better for their clients. And we do that through a couple of different formats. We do that through research. You heard Emily mention the research that we've done this year on digital transformation, among other things that are in our queue to do. But we also do it through community, and that's connecting service leaders across industry, across organizations, in order to elevate the dialogue, really dig into what's working, what isn't. So we're excited to be here today and leverage the research, leverage the community, and really then provide our analysis and insight, kind of aggregating everything that we're hearing across the community around digital transformation and really around how companies are being successful. I think you've heard already a couple of times there's no correct way. We're not going to leave you with a do A, B, C, and D, but there are directions that you can look at within your organization, and we're excited to share those with you today. So with that said, let's jump into that discussion. So for today, we've set some objectives for this particular webinar, which is really learn how to define what digital transformation is for your organization. I mean, at the end of the day, digital transformation is really the process of digitizing things, right? We all have data, processes, procedures, people throughout our organization. And that information, when it's digitized, can be shared with your customers and with your key stakeholders much more effectively. But we're also going to dive into how to deploy digital technology for the first time, if that's where you find yourself. Or you may be a little further down the path and you want to work on improving what you're already doing and really gain concrete ideas for realistic next steps to be able to leverage the benefits of digital transformation in your organization. But when you do that, we encourage you to think about how the processes and information come together to create a consistent experience. It's really something that if you haven't been doing it, please look at it, because when you do this early in your transformation. You set these processes, you set your business rules up, you set it up so that you can be successful as the technology comes in. And major gains that digitization brings, what we've found is that it increases consistent delivery across multiple mediums by more knowledgeable people, right? You're providing the right data at the right time for the right person in order to facilitate the right conversation with your client, or to be able to help your client solve and solution any issues that they may be facing themselves. So that's the basis for where we're going today. So when we look at the research, we've heard from a broad spectrum of industries, and we've heard from a broad selection of service leaders, folks who are driving service leadership as their primary delivery, folks that are in IT that are partnering with the service leaders to bring about the digital transformation. It's important to have that partnership, but these were some of the quotes that we've heard back, right? These were some of the things that people have said directly to us in terms of what is meant by digital transformation. And it's some companies, it's radically empowering the service experience, delivering more customer value, speed the flow of data, right? And at the end of the day, becoming more transparent to our clients, better educate our team, and better operate our systems. I think you'll hear a common theme throughout all of this webcast, which is it's about making the company better, making it better with the voice of the client central to what it is that's driving you. And what we've seen also when we've taken polls across the thousands of folks that are members of the organization and participate in our research is that when people talk about and when leaders are asked if being a digital business is important to the success of their organization, as you can see here, 96% either agree or strongly agree. I round that up a bit, it's basically 100%. That in today's day and age, in the way that we operate our businesses in these digital environments, you have to have a digital transformation strategy, and you have to be working on a digital transformation strategy. And one of the things we've learned by companies that are further along in the journey is there's not necessarily an end point either. It's not a beginning, middle, and an end. It's really a journey that you're on as technology changes, as customer needs changes, and even as marketplace pressures change. So, but being prepared with the right tools, the right people, the right processes, as you'll hear in the conversation here shortly, is important to help you make sure that you're on that journey and are being successful. So when we look at why do people do this, right? Why are companies driving themselves to a digital transformation strategy and an approach and spending time, energy, effort, resources, capital on making this happen? Well, there's some overwhelming components that we're hearing early on. One is 52%, right? View the improvement of customer value. Really being able to deliver for their customers, differentiate themselves in the market, differentiate themselves from the competition. 66% of the organizations that we surveyed believe that augmented reality solutions are the best approach to increase first-time fix rates. And when I talk about augmented reality, this is another component of that digital transformation journey where you're able to bring in tools and technology and hardware that help your organizations speed to a solution, right? And those solutions will drive better first-time fix rates for your organizations, delighting your clients rather than having to make multiple callbacks to fix a problem. And 74% intend to build their business case on the first-time fix rate improvements. And that's significant from the standpoint that that helps fund those initial efforts within the organization, right? It done well and done right, digital transformation can actually provide cost benefit to your organization that can flow through to the bottom line, and that can be a reinvestment in future phases of your own digital transformation. So we encourage you to look at it that way as well. Not to leave out the guys and gals that are on the front line, but field engineers benefit as well. And one of the surveys that we do on an annual basis is the Field Service Engineer Survey, where we ask them how they're feeling supported in their organization, what they need to be more successful. And when we focus in on the digital area of their responses, these are the things that they say matter to them. And if you think about it in the context of what we just mentioned around first-time fix rate, augmented reality, being able to delight the client on a single visit rather than multiple visits, and really being able to understand where the client is before you walk in the door. We've heard from a number of different organizations and frontline engineers within those organizations that having that information, knowing what the customer has experienced, not only on prior service visits, but what they've experienced around billing, possibly around parts supply, possibly around how their account has been managed, really empowers that frontline field service engineer to have a complete and effective conversation with your customer and with your client when they're on site. It puts them in a good position walking in to know exactly the history of that customer and how they've been performing, and frankly, how your own company has been performing in providing your goods and services to them. So these are all important factors as well. Know that these are residual impacts as well. If you do this well, your field service engineer team will be very, very pleased because these are areas that will be normally addressed through that process. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and bring in my colleague, Greg Gibbs, who's going to take us through the next set of slides and deepen this discussion around digital transformation. Greg?
Thank you, Chris. So having said all of that, the question comes up is, where do you start? Or if you have been on this journey already, where do you continue? And we have a short list. I'm sure that there are a lot more we could put on this of possible or likely burning platforms. And if you haven't heard the the term burning platform before. It's been used in leadership circles and change management for years and years about difficult decisions. And specifically, it came from an incident that happened in the North Sea on an oil rig that had experienced a terrible explosion. And of the 190 folks that were on that rig, only a handful survived. And one of them was a guy by the name of Andy Mochin, and he had a difficult decision. He made the decision to jump from that burning platform 15 stories down into unknown waters that had all kinds of debris and sharks swimming in it. And when he was asked in the hospital why he made that decision, he said it was either jump or fry. Well, not that we have all that critical of decisions sometimes in business, but the point here about the phrase or the term burning platform is that most, if not all of you, are in the midst of having to make decisions that don't appear to have maybe the best alternatives, or even asking the question, why do we even need to change now? So the concept behind the burning platform is it's a decision that is better taken than left undone, kind of thing. So, and in the world that we live in, with all the things that are going on right now, the questions that might come up in your mind is this particular objective or is this particular initiative not what it's not what I think is the priority, but I'm being pressured to do that. And not only that, but there's a risk of execution. The possibility of poor outcomes is high. Or we just simply don't have the time for this right now. We don't have the resources, we don't have the people. So all of those things go through, I'm sure, a lot, if not all of your minds when it comes to saying, well, yeah, I want to digitally transform, or I want to improve customer service. So what we're going to talk you through is how you make those decisions. And because you are probably all of you juggling lots and lots of balls in the air. So here are some of the examples of those. Improving customer satisfaction. At the top of the list, process efficiency, first time fix is an example of that, but process efficiency is about doing things right the first time. So first time fix is just top of mind with that kind of concept. Improving mobility to improve productivity, or even mobility that improves the process as well. In fact, disconnect between warranty, support entitlements, and customer expectations leads to inefficiencies as well, rework, unclear objectives, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd like for you to take a look at this list, including these further down on the list: install-based tracking, knowledge base, decreasing revenues. Many, if not all of you, are confronted with or are soon to be the aging workforce and the loss of potential knowledge assets, and legacy systems that don't talk to one another and create communication dysfunction, so to speak, or maybe all of those are going through your mind. What we'd like to do is ask you right now on this call is, and I know there's probably more than just one, but we'd like for you to respond to our poll, a live poll here, and indicate your top burning platform out of all of these 10. And I'm sure there may be some others, but if there's one out of this 10 you could select, we'd like for you to do that now. So there's a poll we have, and it looks like this. And just click on one of those radials and please select your top burning platform.
And Greg, when you think about trying to narrow it down to one, it doesn't mean that you only have to address one at a time as you're plotting your strategy around digital transformation, does it?
No, not at all. We're just doing this to get an idea of what some of the top of mind issues are with the audience today. That's a great question, because we know in a perfect world it would be great if we could just focus on one, but what we're going to be confronted with is how do we prioritize, which we'll talk about a little bit here later.
Perfect.
So I have some preliminary results coming in here. And let's go ahead and move to those results. So I hope you all can see this screen. I'm going to have to scroll a little bit, but it looks to me like the top vote getters, so to speak, process efficiency, improving customer against customer expectation, legacy systems is pretty high on the list. But a lot about customer, if you combine customer expectation with improving CSAT, and process efficiency, it's really the top ones on the list for today, at least from this audience, are improving our delivery to the customer and how we do it. It's basically what we're delivering and how we're doing it, which fits in really well with where we're going today on this talk. So let's go ahead and move forward and talk a little bit about what we mean about transformational change. We've talked about transformation, but let's talk about it in the comparison of what transformation is versus isn't. And that's really comes down to the difference between what we would call incremental improvement versus transformational change. Because when we talk about transformation, just when I hear that term, I think I get overwhelmed. Just hearing the word, I get overwhelmed. And especially if I'm a leader with lots and lots of balls in the air, it's essential that I be able to determine what the expectations are and the level of disruption or the level of transformation that they are going to create in my business. Because otherwise, I will not have a good idea of what the scope is, let alone what really the core objectives are, and to be able to implement against that would be very, very challenging indeed. So here are just a couple of bullets, a couple of key characteristics of the two. Incremental change is really categorized or defined as small improvements to achieve a targeted result. They're what you might say are little wins, but little wins, as we will talk about later, add up to big wins over time. But nevertheless, in and of themselves, these are small improvements, and they're around a specific targeted result. And they don't have any significant impact on structures or culture. So there's not a lot of what you might say culture change management required in them. So here are some examples. Just shortening the accounts payable process. And that in some organizations might even be considered very disruptive, but the typical scope of a process improvement like that is considered incremental. Or improving the employee onboarding process. I don't know if you have that challenge, but many organizations do, is getting our employees up and onboarded, our new hires that is, and fully functional on the job in a short period of time. Those are considered incremental changes. On the flip side, transformational change, they're major. End-to-end improvement. When we say end-to-end, it's broad cross-functional efforts, like something to do with from the time that we interface with the customer and take their order to the time we get the payment. So the order-to-cash process, if you've ever heard that phrase before. That kind of process involves lots and lots of departments, lots and lots of functional areas. And if we're looking to change something that significant, that broad, it's most likely transformational change. These kinds of changes involve changes in business models, and oftentimes it's a company structure will be impacted as well. And culture is going to change because transformational changes really change how we think. In fact, some of the things that we hold of high value now might be questionable in a transformation. Maybe what we consider to be important before is not so much important. So priorities change, culture change. One example of that would be implementing an integrated customer relationship management system with our enterprise and resource management system. So why are we talking so much about this? It's because what we found is that when leaders are looking at driving change, if they haven't answered this question, and not only that, but if they haven't been able to get agreement with everyone that the scope of this initiative is transformational versus incremental, they will start off on the wrong foot from the very beginning. Why? Because they will have missed the degree of impact on the organization and therefore missing key success identifiers for how to implement the change. So again, let's ask you what you think. You've selected a top burning platform. Now we'd like to ask you a question about that burning platform. Do you consider your current change objectives to be incremental or transformational? So based on those definitions of small incremental wins that don't change the culture versus broad end-to-end changes that potentially change culture, changes how we make decisions, maybe in some cases our value system it gets changed a little bit. What are your current change objectives in your mind? Are they incremental or transformational? So there's a poll that we're going to have here that I'll forward for you, and it looks just like this. You got one choice out of those two. And it looks like we have pretty much everyone responded. Thank you, folks. So almost 60% have classified or categorized your changes as transformational, and a little over 40% incremental. Again, why is this important? Well, if you know that it's transformational, there's a roadmap or an approach that includes a roadmap of change that's probably going to be a lot more extensive than if you were to approach a project or an initiative from an incremental standpoint. Different stakeholders are needed, different levels and a variety of communication. Influencing skills are not as critical in an incremental change, although they're very, very important. So at the end of the day, whether it's incremental or transformational, it's still about prioritization. Even I was going to say transforming the accounts payable process, even improving the cycle time of an accounts payable process will require lots of different sub-objectives or sub-measures of success that you will have to consider in your planning. So even there's a prioritization. But I want to stop for a moment, take a time out, and really explain one thing that I haven't yet about incremental and transformational change, and that is that they really are typically one and the same thing when you think about what our long versus our short-term journeys are. Often, I've been speaking about incremental and transformational changes separate, but really they are part of the same long-term. There's the difference between short and long-term outcomes, but for the same ultimate end results, because we are all about improving customer satisfaction, or we wouldn't be in the jobs that we're doing. We're all about process efficiency because we have to run the business that delivers great service, but also is going to make money or save money to make money as well. So we have those same kinds of outcomes. It's just what is it that we do short versus long term. So we don't want to portray transformational versus incremental as mutually exclusive. They're not. They're really all about getting to the same destination. So how do we prioritize? It comes back to prioritization, and your organization's capacity and ability to change will help inform that. So a majority of service organizations have yet to implement an AR solution. So let's switch gears for one moment. I wanted to point out the fact that way back earlier, Chris shared with you a result from our research that showed that 96% of service leaders agreed or strongly agreed that the digital solution was essential. Yet when it comes to just something like AR, which more and more these days is relatively easy, well, in certain ways it's easy to implement without a lot of risk. Notice that 88% are either still evaluating doing something or haven't done anything, and only 12% are using this. So this is based on research that we've done recently. It was issued in 2017, but the final results came out within this year in 2018. So the reason why I showed this slide is we want to ask the question, what's the holdup? You know, why is that gap? And I'm not suggesting that you all are part of that group. This came from our survey of leaders. Maybe some of you took that survey, I don't know. But a burning question for us is, what's the holdup? Why aren't more service organizations implementing digital solutions? We think that part of it has to do with there are just too many issues to address. Back to a little bit ago about the challenge of prioritization, not knowing where to start. We've also heard from our service leaders that they know in their heart of hearts, they know in their mind, they know in their gut that they need to implement this particular solution, whether it's an AR solution, an AI, whatever that might be, but they can't create a compelling case to be able to get the approval to go forward with it. And typically that falls down into the ROI category. What's the return on investment? Or in some cases, the burning platform's not hot enough. Yeah, we know we need to do that, but we're still making a ton of money. Why should we even change? Now, if with that kind of mentality, if we're thinking about or happy with how well we're doing, we're not probably thinking about what could happen around the corner. And maybe just we have to consider being ahead of the game, even if that burning platform isn't hot enough. And in a lot of cases, we just we're not aware of these days how some of these great solutions, some of which the Astea has, are relatively easy to implement with not a lot of risk, leveraging existing tablets that the workforce has, or smartphones in particular. So leveraging the existing technology and just applying a software solution to it is not that disruptive, and these days, in many cases, it's not that expensive. And there have been great benefits from that. We have one of our members of the Service Council that just implemented an AR solution with their field service team on their tablets to help get guidance from the technical call center when they had an issue. And first-time fix rates went up phenomenally, and they paid for their investment. According to the senior VP of that organization, they paid for it within 3 months. I mean, unheard of in implementing a digital solution to be able to have that kind of ROI. So, and last but not least, we know resistance to change is something that exists in lots of different forms, but we also know that, and we've experienced that resistance also occurs with the workforce that's just hesitant to adopt any kind of new state-of-the-art kind of digital solution. But speaking of the talent gap, we also know that many of you are going through this or will soon be experiencing a talent challenge from a couple of different fronts. One is that the aging workforce is one that is paving the way for I guess you could say, a new breed of talent that's coming in. And in a way, that's good news, bad news. We found that the new talent coming in are more open and receptive and capable with digital solutions. But what do we do with the current workforce that may not be quite as adaptive? What do we do with their inability or reluctance to accept new technologies? And that's a question we're not going to answer today. But the talent challenge is around this, for digital solutions that is around this new way of doing business. Successful digital businesses have common traits. We found this from our research and from looking at the marketplace. They're still focused on the customer, but the customers are much more demanding these days. They're judging us based on other providers of service and not just ours. So when they get a great solution from Domino's Pizza, where they can order from multiple different kinds of media and devices and custom order and get it delivered quickly, they're going to have that experience and wonder why we can't do that in HVAC servicing. So the focus on the customer changes, and the expectation for quick response and agility and just intense pressure on innovation is the new way of doing business. And the new talent requirements are that this actually brings us closer together in many cases. When we have greater access to information, we have a greater responsibility to share it with others, especially when it comes to customer information. So there are new talent requirements that also include this existing capability or willingness to adopt digital tools, and a greater responsibility in populating information. You have much easier ability to populate customer data in a knowledge base now than you did before when it was just paper-based, and that's a shift in thinking. You have a greater responsibility as a service provider, service technician in this new world with digital technology. So we wanted to talk about this just to honor the fact that there is definitely a challenge with regard to talent, either now or going forward. Okay, back to our original list. In a perfect world, and I didn't tell you, but I have a lot of experience in process improvement, process innovation with operational excellence and Lean Six Sigma. And so I had to throw this slide in. So just, if nothing else, just allow me this moment to soapbox on going to the root cause. Ideally, what we would do in order to prioritize this long list, if we were confronted with a lot of these in our own world, would be to first find the root causes or the key drivers of the outcomes that we want to do or want to achieve. So if we want to improve customer satisfaction, if we want to improve first-time fix, what are the key drivers that lead to either an undesired result or better, what would be the key drivers of a desired result? And I think having seen your response on the poll, you get that. You actually know that customer service is paramount and that the process to deliver to it is very important. So how do we marry those two is to look then for those key drivers. And the point here is that when we start this way, we're not looking at a digital solution per se. That may be part of the solution. But what we really want to do is get to the core elements that we want to improve upon, and then we can look at prioritizing, because some of those elements may be easier to fix than others. It actually may be CSAT is top of our list, but it may be actually easier to fix the process right now. And improve some efficiencies in the process. That's the kind of intelligence we get when we dive down and look at root causes and key drivers before we make a decision to just select one of these objectives or a short list of these objectives to go forward. So having said all of that, if your change is transformational, and 60-some% of you responded as such, we're providing you with this it's a high-level roadmap, but it gives you the essential elements of how you would approach a transformational change. And that transformational change, if it's a digital one, 13% of you responded that some form of digital change was on your list. That's fine, because this is about transformational change. And in many ways, if at a slightly lower scoped or more narrowly scoped level, it applies to incremental change as well. But it's all about the what, the who, and the how. So what is it that you want to do, and what is it that you need to do then in order to achieve it? So here are the 5 high-level steps of what. Determine that burning platform, and we're not suggesting you have to use that term. Determine your strategy, if you want to refer to it that way, but what's your starting point? What are the burning platforms, or what are the key issues, the key strategic initiatives that you want to improve upon? That's what's captured here within the first step, determining the burning platform. And the who is really, really important every step of the way. So who is it that needs to be involved? One of the things that is fundamental to a successful change is identifying these roles of change. So the leaders, including executive sponsors and what we would call advocates, and those are leaders that are there to support the change, to assist the sponsors. We can't go into detail today, but these roles of change are really essential that you can identify and clarify early on to help set the stage for success. And then the how down below are just some of the core steps that you would take engaging those folks in those essential roles of change. So we can't go into detail on this slide, but we want to share this with you, and I believe that Emily, you will be able to share this deck with the audience, and we're happy to take questions about it and explain some of the elements if any of these are of interest to you today, or even after this call, we're happy to provide some further guidance on how to leverage this roadmap.
Hey, Greg, if you don't mind, I just want to interject here, right? You and I have both been through these transformational changes at different organizations, and we've been talking a lot about the what today, and there's some great information here on the how. But can we just focus just for one more second on the who? Because I think it's really important that if the folks here in this webcast or who they're going to be talking to back home, this is not an individual effort, right? This is an effort that drives some continuity across your organization and collaboration across your organization. It's an important part to your success in terms of being able to isolate on the how and the why that you're doing this, and then be able to drive those results. But those results have to be shared. And I would say one other thing, Greg, and then I'll interested in your feedback, but one of the other things is communication, right? Transformational change and certainly digitization can be disruptive to people who do their jobs today, potentially in an analog way or potentially in an unimproved process way. And when those processes change and when those analog tools go to digital, there's a change management component of this that's really important around the people, and having if you will, having the audience with you, right, and having your team with you is just as important as being able to realize the full benefit of your transformational roadmap. Your thoughts on that?
Chris, I'm glad you asked that question, because one of the biggest detractors of success in a change is not having identified the proper roles. There are 4 key roles in a change, and these are somewhat tied to the organization, but they don't have to be tied to the organizational structure. There are sponsors of change, advocates of change, targets of change. The targets of change are the people that are expected to change. The sponsors of the change are the leaders who have the leverage over those targets. So the leverage over the people that are expected to change, those are truly a sponsor. Advocates are the leaders or influential peers that will help to drive the change, but they don't really have a consequential a carrot or a stick over the people that are expected to change. And then the 4th one is change agents. Change agents are those people that are knowledgeable about the change. They could be your program managers. They could be a Six Sigma professional. They could be process experts, business process managers. Those people that help to make this thing happen are your change agents. So sponsors, advocates, change agents, and targets. And one of the biggest mistakes that organizations make is they call some leader a sponsor when he or she is not. They're only an advocate. They're leaders with influence, but not consequential influence. And I'll tell a quick story. In fact, it had to do with a digital transfer, some digital implementation. It was at a healthcare field service organization, healthcare equipment support. And it was the VP of operations, support operations at the home office, who had decided that they could improve the efficiency of their dispatchers by using some scheduling software that was going to fundamentally change the field service technicians' work. It was a cultural change for them. That VP of operations had this change approved by senior leadership and was going forward with it. But there was a resistance in the field. And why was that? Because he was not the sponsor of that change. He thought he was, but it was the field VPs that oversee the field that needed to be on board and were not fully on board with it. They were not properly brought on board as sponsors. So quick story there, that you can't just call some leader a sponsor and expect him or her to be able to be successful. We have to honor where people are in the organization and what their roles are in order for this change to be successful. And then secondly, to your word about communication, Chris, I probably didn't put communication in this roadmap enough, but it's in there 3 or 4 times. You're absolutely right. Communication every step of the way. And that's one of the fundamental things that leaders tend to forget too. And I'm not here to slam leaders. When I'm talking about leaders, I mean people that are leading change. Is they don't value the need for repetitive communication and interaction with stakeholders and those targets of change. So I hope that helped to answer your question a little bit, Chris.
Yeah, I think, and hopefully it helps the audience, understand the importance of not only the functional aspects of what we're talking about here, but it's that other people aspect, right, of their organization. So I know we're approaching some time, and we want to leave some time for Q&A, so I'll let you continue.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, just a couple of things. If nothing else, just we have this slide, keeping your eye on the ball. Even if you're not embarking on a change initiative right now, incremental or transformational, continue to look to ask your customers about what their expectations are. We oftentimes get internally focused and we forget. Look at your competitors, but also look at other providers that your customers are using, like I used the Domino pizza example a little bit ago, is that our customers are assessing us against all of the different service providers that they're engaging with these days, and they may be considered disparate or not the same in our minds, but the customers are looking at it that way. What can we learn from other providers of service to their customers? And always be looking at the marketplace. What are the trends? And then from David Gianetto's Field Technologies online article, David Gianetto with Astea, just if you can, if nothing else, make sure that you're having an eye on cleansing customer site data. I'm probably preaching to the choir here. You know it needs to be done, but go back at it again and make sure that knowledge base is updated. And examine processes for flexibility and agility, because if you've got standardized and stabilized processes, you'll be able to adapt more quickly when change hits you in the face. I know that's a quick flyby on that slide, but just suffice it to say, keep your eye on the ball, folks. And then in summary, transformation begins with doing the most important things first. So pick those, what are those decisions? They're tough, all of them are tough. Some of them look better than others, maybe, but do the due diligence to find out which ones rise to the top. Prioritize. And define what success looks like. If you don't have clear measurable objectives, you will not know when you're successful, and you'll continue to waffle in this ongoing journey of maybe piloting an initiative, piloting an implementation, and not really being able to say you're successful. And a reminder here, digitization is not a silver bullet. It's really about fundamental change to the organization that digitization helps to deliver on. And do the due diligence, take the time, go slow to go fast. That's important. If do that slow due diligence, going slow in the front, but you'll find that you'll be able to move more quickly with your implementation if you've taken the time to do that due diligence. And of course, like out of a lot of leadership books, you've heard the phrase before, stay the course, stick with it. There is a brighter future ahead if you've done the things that we've talked about today. So with that, got time for questions.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks. So we've got a couple questions here. I'm going to start off with this one. So you had the change roadmap that you brought up. Can you talk more about the roles in the change roadmap? They're saying some of the terms in there were new to them.
Yeah. So the 4 key roles, and glad because I know I went fast on that, are sponsor, and that's the sponsor is a leader who has consequential leverage over the people who are expected to change. And we use this consulting speak, I know, but maybe you have a better term, but those are the targets of change. Those are the people who are expected to change. So you've got sponsors, and you've got the targets of change. Then you have change agents, and those could be business process managers. Those could be HR folks in some cases, but people that will become sort of like experts around the change that will help to turn the dials and be able to implement the change at a project level. Those are your change agents. And then finally, advocates. And advocates are the people that are in influential roles, typically leaders, who will be able to support the change and help to influence it. But they're different from sponsors because they don't have that what we would call consequential leverage over the change targets. So those are the 4 key roles of change.
All right, perfect. So I got another one here. So what if we don't have time to follow the steps that you indicate for success? Just because we don't have the time, what can we do?
Oh, that's a great question, and we get it a lot. And the answer is I would still ask you to be aware of what doing it the right way would look like, and then use that as a way to manage expectations about what will happen. Because if you don't follow the steps of prioritization, and if you do try to solve everybody's requirements or everybody's expectations for all of this long list of change, what you're going to find is you're probably going to install a lot of stuff, meaning we've got the policies, we've got the procedures, we've got some sort of modicum of success that it looks like, but really deep down inside we haven't fully optimized the digital solution. We haven't optimized the process improvement that was intended. We haven't truly optimized our delivery. So long story short, if you don't have the time to do it, just be aware that you're not going to be in a mode to optimize. And to get there will take even longer. But as long as you understand that, and long as you can communicate that, I guess, diplomatically, then that you got to do what you got to do. But just have a lower bar of expectation for what success will look like.
Yeah, I'd caution it a bit though too, Greg, right? From the standpoint that if you don't have the time, my experience has been with some digital transformations, putting in a brand new ERP system at one organization, or putting in a new CRM system to replace a 15-year-old homegrown system, is that we tried to take the aggressive path, right? And we tried to cut some things out of the process, and we tried to skip over some steps, fly by some steps. And part of what we experienced was we spent the next 12 months, literally the next 12 months, fixing it. So it can be disruptive, right? Understand that when you go live with some of these digital transformation efforts, if you haven't managed to the change protocols, if you haven't managed the people, if you haven't managed the processes, but you just implement the technology, you can disrupt an organization. And even worse, when you're disrupting your organization, it directly impacts your clients. And I know we lived through that experience, and it resulted in cuts to the organization, having to do some ill-timed financial moves with people and what have you to try to overcome what we had brought on ourselves, only because of the fact that we hadn't done it according to the process and taken the necessary time and done the due diligence up front. So sometimes it's exciting to try to get to that end state, but I would caution you to say make sure you test, you evaluate, and then you implement in a manageable fashion so that your people, it's important that your people and your customers can keep up with you.
That's a really good point,
all right,
Chris.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. We've got a couple more good ones rolling in here. Be a little quick because we only got about 5-6 minutes left here. So a popular view is that building to a successful long-term transformation is to start with low-hanging fruit. It builds confidence, develops skills among the staff. So starting with the most important thing may not be the best route. So do you guys agree with that? Can you talk a little more about that?
I'm happy to take that on. My bias is to do that, and here's why I would say that, is because when you tackle low-hanging fruit, and you're successful with that, you can build on that success, and it fosters momentum. What it also does, though, is it helps the organization, and I'm speaking just generically about an organization, but the people in that organization, it helps to give them this confidence that they can do this, and they can do it in teams, they can do it cross-functionally. So you're building organizational capability towards greater and greater change. One thing we lack in organizations is that ability to truly function in collaborative teams. And so we're benefiting a lot of different ways by tackling the low-hanging fruit. Now, having said that, I would suggest that the pressures to tackle the most important strategic initiatives are still going to be there, and you may have to do that. But look to where you can also, in parallel, take on some low-hanging fruit projects and work towards building that people capability, that organizational capability to deliver to change. Chris, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'll add to that. Greg and I have a lot of conversations with members in our community around this, and we ask the question, right? What is your organizational DNA around change, right? Meaning, talk to me about what you've changed in the last year, the last 2 years, the last 5 years within your organizations. And it becomes very clear very quickly whether or not they truly have a change DNA capability. Is it strong for them, or is it just getting started? So when we think about the difference between low-hanging fruit and the most important thing, the low-hanging fruit is really important to start with. As Greg said, if you can segment it off to a process, segment it to a team, segment it to a part of your culture, and use that as the catalyst and the accelerator into the rest of the organization, show the organization that change can happen successfully, and then begin to build that culture of change within the DNA of the organization. If you already have that, you can be more aggressive, right? If your organization has demonstrated that and has started to own that, and you hire to that, and you reward that in your culture, you can then take on some of the bigger pieces and do so with confidence. Because teams that have that change DNA know how to respond when the road doesn't go exactly where you think it should go, as will happen in these kind of projects.
Okay. Perfect. So I got one more, guys. I got a couple of minutes. This one's, I guess, kind of a little bit related to that one. So how do you manage a customer base that has, let's say, entirely different comfort levels, operating speeds, productivity expectations? Everything's totally different among, different levels of everything in their digital space.
Chris, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll certainly give that a start. So when we talk about the customer base, right, what I hear when you say that, when the question is being asked, and it's important, is that you have to bring the voice of the customer into these conversations. You can't think you know what the customer says. If you don't have specific customer level data, whether you get it through surveys that you do, or NPS scores, or escalation tickets, or however you manage that within your organization, you have to make sure that what you're solving fits what your customer is telling you they need, right, or what they want. And as Greg said earlier in the presentation, some of that want and that desire may not even come from within your vertical or within your market or even within your competing companies. It may come from a company like Domino's or Amazon or Uber, who are transforming the way customers are interacting with an outcome. And if your customer is looking through that lens into your organization, it's really important to hear that voice. So if you don't have that data, or if you don't feel like you have a strong voice of the customer in the room as you're mapping out what to do first, you got to go and get it. You got to go and talk to some of your customers. You've got to do some additional work. I mean, it's some of the work that we do with our members on a routine basis, being able to bring that information from the market and from the clients back into them so they can validate how they're managing their decisions, so that they are able to deliver and set customer expectations of this first, this second, this third, but we hear you, we're moving down this path. Greg?
Well, yeah, I'd love to respond might have to take this offline since we're at the top of the hour. Emily, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right, perfect, guys.
We can definitely follow up with people afterwards, because I know we are already over time today.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, guys. So if you do have a question right now, too, you can submit it through the Q&A, and you'll get an answer from Chris and Greg and Emily. So submit that now. Thanks to Chris, thanks to Greg, thanks to Emily for your guys' great insight, this great, super informative presentation, tons of information. We will have a follow-up afterwards that will go out to everyone with a copy of the slides and the recording, so you will get that. A couple people asked. That'll be coming to you. Thank you to the whole audience. Thank you guys for joining us and for staying on and listening to us and asking these great questions. And we hope that everyone here has a great rest of your day.